Priscilla is a native of Clinton, Massachusetts. Massachusetts, right? I was thinking it was Connecticut. Clinton, Massachusetts, and is a social entrepreneur, activist, and inventor whose social enterprise, Sprout Change, started as a hashtag in February 2016 to influence grassroots advocacy in consumer education around alternative medicine, organic agriculture, sustainability, and food and social justice. Huge. Sprout Change. Today's Sprout Change has gone from a grassroots movement to a budding startup. In the last few years since the Sprout Change movement started, Priscilla has graduated from Eden Valley Institute in Loveland, Colorado. Upon her return home to Clinton, Priscilla has held workshops at faith-based organizations, and then she traveled to Europe. She spent time in Germany and France as an apprentice at sustainable agriculture farms. She's learned permaculture farming, and since then has held many more public speaking engagements and workshops. She was raised as a nutritarian. How many of you are nutritarians? I bet more of you are than you know you are. It is a diet that is mainly plant-based and gluten-free. How many of you are nutrients? A few more hands, maybe? That's good, that's good. She's currently practicing a healing foods, plant-based diet and lifestyle. As a product of multicultural upbringing, she's a polyglot and loves learning about the local and natural remedies and herbs wherever she travels. She's a multi-generation herbalist who, in her free time, loves foraging for wild medicinal herbs, conducting holistic test kitchen experiments, and creating her own therapeutic formulas. It's my pleasure to introduce Priscilla.
So welcome to Sprout Change. Sprout Change helps you sprout change using food as medicine, natural remedies, and herbs. Our social mission is to empower everyday people to become autonomous with their overall health, and our vision is for Sprout Change to become a global, transformative grassroots movement that not only helps everyday people transition into a healing food diet and lifestyle, but also empowers us to regenerate our shared earth and natural resources in a resilient manner. We offer 3 products and services, and that is servicing the individual with one-on-one client protocols, the community with group and organizational wellness workshops, and the ecosystem. And today we're going to focus on the ecosystem, the Nodes in Garden project. And a little bit about what we're doing is we offer a full circle solution to food insecurity and climate change. That services the needs, as I mentioned earlier, the individual, community, and our shared ecosystem. Our slogan, as you saw earlier, is helping you sprout change using food as medicine, natural remedies, and herbs. The reason I'm here today is to talk to you a little bit about regenerative agriculture and no-dig gardening and the benefits of having a no-dig garden. However, it would do you a disservice to begin talking to you about the benefits of no-dig gardening if I didn't tell you about the certain situations that we're in today. And that is a climate or a reality of food insecurity and climate change. And so this is why we started. I'm a social researcher, so I'm going to give you a presentation that's more on social sciences. You know, what's going on with our communities and the individuals that make up that community. With a little bit of some sciences. So we have the soil depleted. We're facing climate change. A lot of natural disasters are happening on a more frequent basis. We are also facing food insecurity and inaccessibility. And does anybody not understand what food insecurity means? So we're all familiar with the term, that's great. And also we're facing a lack of consumer knowledge on medicinal foods and natural remedies. With food insecurity, 90% of natural disasters are floods, storms, droughts, and these are doubling since the early 1990s, with climate change. And climate change will also be increasing by 20% by 2050. And just by a 2%, a 2-degree change, we can actually displace even more people. And with a 4-degree change in Celsius, we're going to displace 1.8 billion people. So really looking at what's happening with food insecurity as well as what's happening with climate change is important for us to be able to really understand what's happening with combating hunger. I looked up a few statistics on the stats for New London, Connecticut, as well as Massachusetts and New England. And what it states is that 1 in 8 people in New England County, and also it coincides with the state of Connecticut, are food insecure. And this from Worcester, Massachusetts, so 1 in 11 in Worcester County, as well as coinciding with the state, are food insecure. 1 in 9 in New England are food insecure. Maine is the most food insecure state of all of New England, and the lowest in the food insecurity is Rhode Island. I would say, just a wild guess with Maine, would probably, a big contributor would be the climate. And then, as far as the U.S., food insecurity in the U.S. impacts 1 in 8 people, and 1 in 6 children in the U.S. are food insecure. And food insecurity affects more women than it affects men. Nearly 1 in 7 households with children cannot afford to buy food for their families, and we have to really consider that there's more socioeconomics that are interplay. These are people that even have jobs that are earning income, sometimes are earning 2 incomes. So food insecurity is something that is impacting people that even have supposed living wages. And 1 in 4 people are food insecure, are unlikely to qualify for most federal nutrition programs. In 2018, 5.6 million U.S. households experienced severe food insecurity. And as I mentioned earlier, a lot of these people that are suffering from food insecurity are people that don't have access to fresh foods, living foods, so they're in food deserts, if you will, areas where the foods are actually highly processed or shelf-stable, and they don't have maybe, let's say, a local farmer's market or a local farm nearby providing them fresh foods. And what makes this even more troubling is that the New Food Economy released an article recently stating that medical schools dedicate less than 1% to educate future doctors on diet. So if we're thinking that the doctors are going to solve the problem, it's really not happening. So this is something, a lot of what I started, as Maggie was saying, started as a grassroots movement. Started through activism. I have 17 years in activism. And I went from being an activist in healthcare, thinking, I love science. I really thought that the solutions were in lobbying, in patient rights, disability rights, trying to pass bills that would really help impact the consumer. And the more I got into it, and the more my own health was impacted by certain protocols and treatment plans that I was advised to follow, the more I realized this is not working. And at one point, my health was so impacted that I thought, you don't know what you're doing, I'm going to go back to my childhood roots. And it was in going back into my childhood roots that I was actually told at one point that I was actually not following the treatment plan, that I was a danger to myself because I wanted to go back to my childhood roots of medicinal herbs. And it took, if I hadn't had those 17 years of advocacy experience, I would not have had the opportunity to self-advocate and to actually lead with my testimony and start a movement that many are actually leading today that is helping to shift consumer awareness and helping to shift healthcare into a direction where we are today. And so if you think that your doctor knows what they're talking about, really think about that they're not taught in school anything about diet or nutrition. That's just not part of the curriculum. As you may be aware, the market currently, or the circumstances currently in the US, and even around the world, but especially in Western countries, is that we have chronic diseases, many of them which I think are preventable, and these are obesity, diabetes, heart disease. And with these chronic diseases on the rise, and with the state of healthcare, and consumers feeling that healthcare doesn't have their best interests in mind, or that healthcare is just not affordable, they're looking into alternatives. And they're looking into, a lot of them are looking into wellness travel, so they'll go to another country to get treatment, or they'll actually look into holistic treatments. And that's where my road to education or re-education started. I went to a few lifestyle centers, as Maggie had shared, in Colorado and subsequently in Europe, that were farm to table, focusing on holistic and alternative treatments, or as you will, traditional treatments, as more appropriately deemed. One of the things that we've identified with Sprout Change, because I am looking at solving a social problem with a social solution, is no-dig gardening. So I had learned permaculture farming, and I had learned these regenerative practices. Is anybody not familiar with the term permaculture? Okay, great, wonderful. Okay, so permaculture is a term that was coined in the mid-1970s, and what it means is literally permanent agriculture. So you're looking at growing foods that are perennials or natives that are going to be self-propagating over and over again, and so you're creating you're mimicking the natural environment. Think of like the forest, and so you're trying to do that in your own ecosystem, your own micro ecosystem, whether it's your garden or your farm or small-scale farming. And so the solution with the solutions that no-dig gardening offers to an everyday person is that they can grow their own organic healing foods using less space, less water, and they can grow more in that space. So you're getting a lot of wins. You're getting wins for the people, you're getting wins for the environment, and you're also getting a win for the profit, as far as the profit is concerned, for the consumer. Because the consumer now is getting a return on their investment for what they're growing in such little space. And also it's a type of garden that you can literally walk away from. And so you regenerate soil, you actually can put into action, or you can put into place climate action, you generate food security, you create accessibility to healthy foods, and you also create consumer education around healthy foods. And so it's an impact that really helps remedy the woes of people that are living in food insecure places. You want to get them to become autonomous. And I know it may seem daunting to start going into transitioning if you've never had a garden or you've never done things and now you're going to have concepts of regeneration and permaculture. What we try to do is we try to take all these best practices and we get rid of the jargon and we talk about what's in it for the consumer. What are they going to get? What are the takeaways? And we use this language, and we actually come from an educator perspective where in our workshops we have a glossary of terms and we're introducing them to sustainability, to what they can do for the climate. And this is an audience that may not necessarily think about how their carbon footprint or what they can do, or how their decisions are impacting the climate. And to get them to become aware and to grow and become conscientious and be part of, in their small bit, to take a step towards remedying our environment. I think that it raises awareness and they start storytelling and sharing these great news, and I think that if we can do this shift, we can make a really huge impact when it comes to having a brighter, greener future. I'm also going to share with you a little bit about regenerative agriculture, and regenerative agriculture as a whole is really looking at agriculture that is regenerating the soil, that is creating biodiversity in the micro ecosystems that are underneath the soil, but they're also diverse. They're implementing native and perennial plants, and so you're having diversity in the animal and wildlife around, but you're having diversity also in the soil beneath. And with regenerative agriculture, you're sequestering carbon from the atmosphere, and you're also, and also it could be said nitrogen, and with regenerative agriculture, because you're not tilling or disturbing the soil, you're improving the topsoil, and so you are actually able to mitigate natural disasters, because then you're less susceptible to erosion and other types of impacts, detrimental impacts to your farming or gardening area, because you're actually preserving that ecosystem. And so this is a picture that I am using from Kiss the Ground, who does a lot of great advocacy work on regenerative agriculture. And you can see here the two types of farms and how they compare the one that's tilled versus the one that's not tilled. And with not tilling, you're really just flattening, you're growing right above what was grown last. You're just flattening that over. And this is more large scale. With the no-dig garden, we're just actually, flattening things off by hand. We're, because it's a small garden space, you don't want to walk on it, because by walking on it, you could actually flatten the soil, and by flattening the soil there, you can actually, there's some air tunnels that are naturally created, and you don't want to disturb those air tunnels, and so, because they really help with managing the water filtration as well as absorbing the water to moisture the soil. So that's, I thought that was a great picture to show. Another great benefit to regenerative agriculture and pollinators, and a lot of talk has been going on, circulating on how the benefits of regenerative agriculture in supporting bees and also other types of pollinators. And it's because with regenerative agriculture, you're looking at growing diverse crops. And so instead of traditional farming where you're looking at monocropping, with regenerative agriculture, you're looking at creating landscape that is utilizing different types of ecosystems. And so you're really mindful about how that space, whether it's farmland or garden, is planted or sowed with crops that are diverse. And so now we're going to transition to talking about the No-Dig Garden Project. So with the No-Dig Garden Project, we spoke a little bit about what no-dig gardening means, but it's exactly what it sounds like. You're not digging, you're not tilling, and it's actually less work, as we shared earlier. One of the biggest benefits that I found in my experimenting with no-dig gardening is the amount of water that you conserve. So this year I watered my garden, or this season I watered my garden 5 times. And so that is a testament to the different layers that you use to build the garden bed. And a lot of those layers, especially if you're using mulch and old wood and other compostable materials that are pretty thick, they actually function like little sponges that are spread throughout the garden bed. And so when it rains or when you have high moisture, they collect water, and when there's drought, the water is slowly released. And so, or when there's high heat times, that water is able to be utilized. And this is a picture. We have a no-dig garden group where I share experiments that I'm conducting with the no-dig garden. The no-dig garden workshop series are actually 4. And the first one is where you build the no-dig garden bed, which is an evergreen bed. You build it once, and all you do afterwards is feed it. So you just maintain it and feed it. And then there is the companion planting workshop. And then we talk about natural pest control and maintenance. And the last workshop is garden to table. So we're really looking at this as education, as a full circle solution to solve food insecurity and climate change. And when I think of food insecurity, I'm really looking at how do we get the consumer up to speed on ancient knowledge that is lost? That, for some weird reason, or maybe because of industrialization, or maybe because of the change in our social structure since World War II, when women started going into work more and more. And so the dynamics of the families changed with two adults in the household, in a traditional household working. Then now you have, let's say, less assistance in the home. And by having less assistance in the home, or you would have less food, and then that goes into having more foods that are, processed, become shelf stable, and over time, because of a desire to have more profits, the foods become less nutritious. But the foods also become less nutritious because of depleted soil, so we're getting hit from both ends. This is a visual of the garden bed at the top. We're doing a lasagna layering, so it's also dubbed, the Nojic garden is also dubbed a lasagna garden. And it's exactly what that sounds like. You're doing a lot of different layers, and so we actually, contrary to this, I think this graph shows, yes, it shows peat moss. We don't use peat moss because peat moss is not sustainable, but we also use, but I thought this was a beautiful image. We use biodegradable materials that are native to wherever we are. So for the New England area, you have your leaves from the fall, you have some twigs, you have grass clippings, you have hay, you have compost manure. When we start the garden bed, let's say if you're not going to prepare if you're going to just do it from scratch, you've never gardened in your life, you don't have a garden area, you just place some cardboard on top of the grass. On top of that cardboard, you would place some rock dust or pulverized rock, and that helps break down the cardboard over time. It feeds the fungi, and then you would do soil, and then you do some leaves, compost manures, and you repeat those layers until you get about 3 feet high, and you can do much higher if you'd like. Ideally, you would start in the fall, but you could certainly start in the spring. And why in the fall? Any ideas? Yeah, so it gives it more time to break down so that you really get a more abundant microorganism activity. So by the time the spring comes along, it's a very active garden bed beneath the soil. And so you already have soil that's been started ahead of time, broken down ahead of time. And the bottom picture is from a small-scale farm. One of our garden teachers, she has a homestead, and in this homestead, you can see on the left the soil that she started with, and you can see on the right a really nice, soft, dark, rich earth that she ended up with. These are some pictures of our garden bed, and so I've experimented. It looks, I'm going to use the red dot. So this right here, it looks really messy, but here we have actually a lot going on. We have beans, we have radishes, we have kale, lettuce, potatoes on this side, the kale's down here somewhere, we have radishes over here. Over here we have squashes at the end. These tall plants on this side are actually potatoes. And all around we have beans, which are I learned through learning about permaculture, is that you want to use natural fertilizers, and so we were using beans to fix nitrogen into the soil. And you can also, harvest them. And so this right here is a tropical plant, so it creates its own microclimate. And the soil is much warmer because you have so many layers. And so if you're planting, if you're planting and you know where you're putting the companion plants, you can actually nestle some warmer climate plants in the middle, and the rest of the plants that are hardier could actually be wind barriers and take care of those plants for you. And so you can really have a lot of great activity, and so it also functions as wonderful flowering plants for pollinators. And this is the no-dig garden bed now, and so we have this no-dig garden that is now getting ready to overwinter, and these above are the results. And I did an experiment where I dug all around the periphery to implement hugelkultur. Does anybody not know what hugelkultur is? Just raise your hand. Okay, wonderful. So hugelkultur is German for hill culture, also very similar to permaculture, or I think it's part of permaculture. And with hugelkultur is you're creating also the layers of that you would in a permaculture or a lasagna bed or a no-dig garden bed. However, you dig first and you put really big chunks of logs or twigs or branches or even other compostable materials, and you create a mound. You create this hill, and that it's filled underneath with all these biodegradable materials, primarily wood-based materials. And what that functions over time is one big sponge. And so if you're in a very arid desert-like area, it would make wonderful sense to use this. Or let's say you want to vacation the whole summer, then it would make a lot of sense for you to implement hugelkultur. So this season, or rather this winter going into next spring, I implemented hugelkultur just around the periphery. I dug all around, and I put branches that were pretty old, about 1 inch in diameter in the width, and I did that all along, and I covered it with leaves. And so I'm going to experiment to see if that is going to help preserve the water. So instead of digging the whole soil bed up, I'm going to experiment to see if implementing best practices from hugelkultur on the periphery will absorb the moisture in the garden bed, keep that moisture in the garden bed. So that's a test. I haven't seen it done yet, so but a theory suggests that it should work. And then here we have a lot of earthworms that I just picked up. I put them back in, but I was really impressed that I just did a little bit of digging and they were just popping out, and I thought, wow, the soil is so rich. And I've only been experimenting with no-dig gardening for it's going to be 2 years this November. So it's really amazing what can happen in such little time. So our traction, I'm going to start speeding through some of these slides. Our traction really started, as Maggie said earlier, in 2016 as a hashtag. I was really fed up with what was happening with healthcare, what was happening, as a social activist and food justice activist with food. I consider myself very fortunate being raised with a mom that's been doing health and wellness workshops for 40 plus years. I never in a million years thought how handy that would come into the present times. I just thought that's in the back of my pocket. If I get sick, I know what to do. But being a young person, I really preferred a quick fix. I'm not going to lie. I really wanted the science route. But until science really hurt me, I thought, I didn't think anything of it. And once it really hurt me, I think I went through cognitive dissonance. I was in denial at first. I thought, this can't possibly be true. I mean, everything I've studied, everything I know, the laws, laws. But no. And so I think it really took me a long time to realize, yes, it could happen to you, and actually it's happening to a lot of people. And I think when I reached that awakening, I thought, I can't stay quiet. I did get burned in the process as an activist. I got backlash, political backlash. I was hacked and I was persecuted, and I think I still am today, but my brother told me that if it's happening, I used to be scared, and my brother told me, if this is happening, it's because they're actually more scared of you than you are of them. And I tell myself, anytime that I feel concerned about the work that I'm doing and what I feel that is right and that I feel that I was born to do, I just tell myself, if I'm getting this pushback, it's because it's working. And I'd like to say joyfully that it is indeed working. I'm part of a few councils, one of which is the Worcester Food Policy Council. And this July they announced that they were going to have the Massachusetts just announced a state plan for food as medicine. And that means healthcare is paying attention to, local activists and grassroots people and organizations and consumers that are saying, we want healthcare to be more reflective of the sciences that have always existed. And so this shift is happening, and I believe this shift is happening because of consumers that care, because of people speaking up, because of people saying, we can't stay quiet anymore. And because of people willing to bravely go back to their knowledge, or even bravely study something they've never studied and trust that if it worked before, 50, 70, 100 years ago, it should certainly still work today. And so we started as a hashtag in 2016. 2017, I started apprenticing in farms. From Colorado to France to Germany. I had the opportunity to farm in different climates, and by November 1st, 2 years ago, we had our first no-dig garden bed. This is our traction for our workshop series, our first workshop series. We've been able to influence local organizations that have way more headway than we do, way more traction, way more experience, to really look at how valuable the consumer, the everyday person is when it comes to regenerative agriculture. So NOFA now started focusing on small scale and garden level no-dig gardening, regenerative agriculture. So this is really a testament to the power of an everyday person. Not just looking at teaching farmers that do small scale or mid to large scale farming, really looking at, can we take these best practices into the garden? By 2018, we had done our workshop series, our first garden workshop series. We did a training to see if this could work as a cooperative model. One of my goals is that these no-dig garden workshop series do function as a cooperative model, and so it's something that I believe belongs to the ecosystem, it belongs to the community, and it's something that I hope that eventually, as we grow, this knowledge is something that can help make communities more interdependent. In 2019, we've dedicated a lot of the work to research and implementing our methodology and protocols, conducting feasibility studies, and just doing paperwork to try to get our startup up and running. I must say that if you're going to follow me eventually on social media, sometimes I'm active, sometimes I'm not, and that's because I am neurodiverse. And so in my whole healing journey, which started this knowledge, and neurodiversity is just a fancy way of saying that, your mental health is sometimes there and sometimes is not. And so, and that's something that I used to feel very disappointed about, especially when I went through the healthcare system where they told me everything that was bad about my mental health. And now I'm learning that there's actually a lot of positives if I reframe and use different language. And so Dr. Elaine Aron talks about being a highly sensitive person and how that's naturally occurring in the animal kingdom. And so it doesn't just happen in humans, it happens also in bird species, and in frogs and amphibians, in any kind of animal. And so it made me feel really wonderful that there's scientists and researchers and social researchers that are talking about different types of brains and different types of nervous systems, and how what used to be pathologized by Western medicine are actually gifts and unique things. Unfortunately, because of the industrialization and because of the tech world that we live in, my nervous system still gets fried, if I'm doing a lot of things. And so I will have symptoms that are considered pathological. And so I tend to do things, in my own way. Some things might take me a little bit longer. Some things might happen much faster. And so I've embraced that. And when I share on my social media and my workshops, a lot of the work I do, I feel that I owe it to our communities to share this, because I wonder how many more of our communities have individuals just like myself. Highly sensitive people make up 20% of the population, are being drugged. And Dr. Aaron believes that these people can see the world differently, and they offer the innovations and ideas that the world needs to be able to take the world to the next level, to be able to be a better place for us all. So we're supposed to, she calls us the advisors to the warriors who, don't really care about the state of the earth or where we're going. But, imagine if a lot of our highly sensitive talent is being drugged. And that means that we have a lot of spoiled innovation. We have a lot of talent that is, being taken away from us. And so a lot of the solutions that we could possibly have today are not available to us today. And so I think by raising awareness and by using gardening as a medium, and a wonderful medium for mental health, because you're getting the soil there's actually bacteria in the soil that functions as antidepressants. And so, but more than that, you're getting sunlight, which is vitamin D. You're getting fresh air, which is oxygen, which we need. And you're also getting dopamine hits because you're seeing something grow that you worked hard for. You're getting physical activity, which we need. How often do you go to the doctor and they ask you, how much movement are you doing? And so with gardening, it's actually really wonderful for mental health. So would consider if every hospital had some kind of sustainable garden as part of their treatment protocol. It's a win for the whole community, the individual, as well as our ecosystem by sequestering carbon from the environment. Our goals going forward are to, for 2020, is to be hosting our next No Dig Garden workshop series. By 2025, we'd like to be working more closely with anchor institutions and implementing our protocols with them. And by 2030, we would like to have our farm-to-table think tank and training institute. This was our 2018 to 2019 No Dig Garden team. And a few pictures of where I've studied. So Eden Valley in Colorado, I went in the spring and it's just freezing, it's brutal. So they use a lot of greenhouses. It's so brutal. And even in the greenhouse, it's just brutal. But it was a wonderful experience. I have so much respect for farmers. And these are our greenhouses. My parents visited me around the time that I graduated and harvesting. This is the herbalist. So the beautiful thing about training at lifestyle centers is because they implement holistic treatments with their clients and patients. I learned massage therapy, herbalism, hydrotherapy, healing foods protocols for the clients to reverse or stabilize their illnesses, and also the farming. This is in Les Mas-Perdue in France. It's in the south of France. It's super hot, so I went from brutal cold to almost 104 degrees at noontime, and we were forced to take siestas, because it was just, you just can't work. So we had to work really early in the morning to start watering the plants before the sun starts to heat up at 9. And then we, around after lunch, we took a siesta, maybe we did some chores. You get tired because the heat's so strong. And then we worked again in the early evening, and then we prepared dinner. And this is our classroom. It seems informal, but we did learn a lot. Harvesting some lettuces, and these were grown in the shades next to the olive groves. And you can possibly, if I back up, you can possibly see the mulch that's used, which is permaculture. Some of the foods that we ate that were farm to table, including purslane, which is one of the highest plant-based sources of omega-3 fatty acids essential for brain health, and that's a wild edible. So I was always in the kitchen. I like hiking, and so we had the opportunity to spot some natural herbs, and so this is juniper, and this is thyme. It was the first time that I saw wild thyme, so I was really geeking out. And then this is Germany. It was colder, so imagine going from 104 degrees to 60 degrees in the summertime. This is July. Wet, spring-like. I wore desert-like clothing there. I had to wear all 3 layers of my desert clothes because I didn't know I would do this. You know, when you're following your passion, things just line up. It's serendipity. And so I was invited to go, and I had the perfect amount of money in the bank to book my flight. I went and I got permaculture certified in this beautiful old castle in the north of Germany. And this was our classroom outside and in this old cathedral-like type of place. And the students came from all over to do this training. And our professor, he's an international permaculture consultant. And so that was really divine alignment to be able to train under him. And this is a picture of me and one of my colleagues. We were building some no-dig garden beds, and we just so happened to be taking the training while they were filming it also. And every time I visit, because I have my mom who's health and wellness and natural remedies, I've always had a passion for medicinal herbs. So everywhere I go, I always either forage or find out what the local herbs are. And this is linden flowers that I harvested, the largest linden flowers I've ever seen, and they actually retain this green. These are dry linden flowers. I've only seen the yellow linden flowers. So it was really nice for me to dehydrate my own linden flowers and have this bright chlorophyll even after it's dry. And look at how huge this wild chamomile flower is. And we did green juices from, medicinal herbs, wild medicinal herbs growing in the garden, like plantain and, I don't know, the farmer, for whatever reason, sometimes he didn't care if there was grass. He was like, oh, it's chlorophyll, which we do need for our blood. And so these were our sponsors in 2018, and so a lot of the work that we're doing is because of in-kind donations, and so I think that's another thing that has happened thanks to serendipity, just following your passion and those doors start opening up. So I'm really grateful. 2020, it'll be a little different, and once we're an official entity, we'll have to start showing that we're making a profit and start creating some kind of revenue stream. But for now, everything we've conducted has been very organic, and it just all the people, materials, tools have just manifested really beautifully. And our next step is to pay our staff, since it's volunteer run, and to offer our products and toolkits to more programming, and then eventually to have our farmland and education center. And thank you so much for your time. I'm not sure if we have enough minutes.
You have time for questions.
So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to take them now. Yes?
Are you focusing mostly on small yards in the city, or just any? Is there a focus on like suburban yards or city yards?
That's a great question. Yeah, we did start purposely in food insecure locations, which tend to be in urban areas. However, rural areas, which sometimes can be considered suburban, are also food insecure. So we're really looking more at which areas are the constituents or the residents most impacted by scarcity of fresh foods, and can we do something about that through education, through giving them tools and resources and knowledge and know-how, instead of just saying, okay, you can use EBT, travel 30 miles away, or SNAP benefits, or you can go to this food pantry, get some food. my thing is, just as old proverbs, why give when you can teach, right? And you're really looking, if we're looking at regenerative agriculture, sustainable agriculture, why are we not looking at sustainable solutions, right? So I'm not looking at this no-dig garden project to be a project that is technically evergreen. Maybe one day, this will become a norm, and then I'll just move on to the next innovative solution that I need to solve. So my idea is that right now, I feel that the timing is for me to solve this solution, but I'm already starting to feel like, oh, we have all these people doing this kind of work, being inspired to do this kind of work. Maybe I don't need this job anymore. Maybe I can create a new job. So, any other questions? Yes?
Have you been working at all with school systems and the school lunch projects and such things?
I would love to do that. We do have a fully accredited internship program, and so the wonderful thing about having an accredited internship program is that you have already those relationships established with faculty. Unfortunately, with schools, universities, at least in particular, it takes a long time. So right now, I'm still negotiating a contract with my alma mater, Worcester State University, and we're almost going into year 2. Trying to really, because a lot of what I'm creating and want to know, and also making sure that the university doesn't own any of the things that I do create, that it remains part of Sprout Change, then what I'm learning is that, at the time and still today, they didn't have such departments. They never had faced those types of questions. And so they had to conduct their own due diligence. And now we're trying to, come back, because what could happen is, let's say, for me, as a social entrepreneur is like a nonprofit, but you make your own profit. So you're doing good, you're mission focused, but you're supposed to generate enough income to be able to pay for your own programming and your overhead expenses and operating expenses. And so if a university owns my rights or anything that I create, then I'm not really able to make money as an enterprise off of any programming that I create. With the universities, there was some conversation about creating a program that could be implemented to the K through 12 public school systems. And so that's something that's still in conversation. And so I haven't given up hope, because these conversations might take a year or 2. Sometimes it might happen faster, but I'm still at it. And in the meantime, I'm trying to see which other universities are receptive to this idea and looking to collaborate with them as well.
So are you setting up as a nonprofit or?
I would be as a business, an actual business, an LLC, probably has sole proprietorship. But the term social entrepreneur was coined by Muhammad Yunus, who is a Nobel Peace Prize laureate, and he was able to solve with small farmers in India, women farmers. He was able to solve their food insecurity issues and they're not having a lot of cash flow and poverty through microloans. And so the loans were so small and so affordable, and he tended to loan only to women, because he noticed that women, not only did they pay back, they were faithful with their loans, but they also took care of those around them. So they were very faithful to their communities and their families, and so they reinvested. And so it was a win-win. And so it was such a, these microloans, we weren't really making money, returns on them, but they were impacting the community. I don't think that the concept for Sprout Change is going to be on a microloan basis, but social enterprise was something that was coined by him, because he introduced the whole looking at an actual for-profit business that could actually make a social impact.
So, at the lecture was supposed to be, you were going to explain to us the dig gardening, but it sounds like it's almost proprietary, that you don't share the information unless you take the class. You want to teach in a college, but it's your information.
Well,
so that's what kind of sounds like what's going on.
Thank you. That's what's proprietary would be more of what is actually any methodology that's created or programming. But the concept would be, and I'm still developing a lot of this, I'm looking for advisors, so if you want to be an advisor, but the idea is that the no-dig garden is going to be somehow be managed commerce-wise as a cooperative, which belongs to whoever owns it, to the stakeholders. And so I didn't go into the economies, but my vision for Sprout Change with 3 products and services that we offer is the one-on-one client protocol would just be me as a consultant, as well as a wellness. I do demos and tastings and organizational wellness, so think like employee wellness, except that it's, instead of fitness training programs, you have medicinal foods and holistic treatment training workshops. You have a facilitator come in to talk about these things. But then the no-dig garden is going to be a cooperative. It's going to be run as a cooperative, and so it would be employee owner. And so with the university, what would run into the situation, which I found through intellectual property attorneys, is that if you're working with a university, even if you conduct research, over time it just belongs to the university, and so you can't really create that into an enterprise, whether it's a cooperative or another, unless you're collaborating as just research. And so the idea would be to keep it distinct, and I know that I have very lofty dreams, and then eventually it's going to become a think tank. So then eventually I have all these types of for-profit that eventually there is a nonprofit that becomes a foundation / research center. And so that's a long-term goal. To me, it makes a lot of sense, but maybe to somebody who's very bright in as a very bright economist, it might be more of a 60-year plan. Yes?
Have you tried the no-dig gardening in containers, like big containers or like rooftop gardens, anything like that?
I haven't tried it in rooftop gardens, but I do try it in containers, and I do it a lot. I use the same concept, mostly for experiments, but I believe it works. And really because I'm sometimes on the road, and sometimes things happen just last minute, and so I'm not able to water my garden or my plants, whether they're potted or outdoors, as frequently. And so I really love the whole permaculture aspect of conserving water, not just as because you're doing conservation, but also in the sense of less work for me. And so yes, I believe it works also in container gardening. And a neat tip about that I've been experimenting is that instead of doing all the layers, I actually mix everything. So I do some layers, and then some of the soil, I'll pre-mix it with the manure and the compost, and actually I use shreds of newspaper. And so, because that also breaks down, and so, and that functions as moisture retention. Am I good with time?
One more question.
One more?
This actually follows the container gardening question as a practical thing. Because the soil in New London is mostly tainted with lead and other toxins, anyone who's growing food, backyard or in community gardens, has already built raised beds to do it in. Are there any particular adaptations to the no-dig method that would particularly work in conjunction with raised beds that are already built?
I think, just as a researcher, a wild guess, and I'd like to see this be investigated, actually done a case study on, is, using certain types of mushrooms that are known to be able to clean chemical waste, as well as certain algae that is known to also pick up chemical waste. And so, and maybe even looking at certain types of minerals. So I would be curious to know if you did layers of these naturally existing fungi that actually do clean up waste. If you do layers of that, will it still be safe for human consumption? Does it, and you do it with different layers, will the end result with the plant, will the plant still function will the root system still carry up the pollutants, or will it naturally be broken down, in its own ecosystem? And so I think that's something that I'd be curious. I mean, the direction I'd like to go with Sprout Change, to be honest, and maybe this would answer some of the concerns with the finances, is I really would like to focus more on I'm gifted at, more natural at, and I'm more natural as a researcher. And so I'd like to be able to collaborate more with other researchers and focus more on the experiment side of things, which takes a lot more time. But the reason I am doing this work is because at the time when I did start doing the grassroots advocacy, there was very little talk about consumer-level regenerative agriculture. Right now, it seems that every garden and community garden is now looking at soil health. So there's really no need for me to continue talking about teaching no-dig gardening, and I really should be focusing more on why I started this to begin with, which was really looking at, I see this happening with food insecurity, I see this happening with climate change, I see this happening with the individual and the community, this is what's happening in laws. How do we look at all of this and break it down so that we create small steps that an everyday person can take and do something about it, right? And I think in less than 3 years, the fact that healthcare and that Congressman McGovern in Massachusetts created a bipartisan food is medicine working group in January 2018 is a testament to grassroots work. And so I'd like to stay more on where I'm more strong. But I think that I'm very happy to see that it is so contagious, because by it being contagious means that we're going to get closer and closer to mitigating climate change at a much faster rate. Thank you.
Thank you.